Invitations were extended. One has not confirmed, and one had confirmed but withdrew the nomination. However, Mr. Ngavoka has confirmed he will be coming for the leaders' debate. He's already come for one session on Straight Talk already, and we will also have candidates coming in, the youth candidate debate, which is next week, and also the women candidate debate that also takes place next week. Now, the economy affects everyone and everything in a nation. Some may say it is not their problem, but macro or microeconomic decisions do matter. The economy consists of how a country is doing in the production of goods and services, exports, imports, taxes, duties, employment, investment, the performance of different sectors, and the provision of services to you, the people of this country. Before I start the questions, I have briefed the gentleman here, and firstly on your behalf, Mr. Chaudhry, thank you for accepting our invitation. Mr. Richard Naidu, NFP's leading member of the party's think tank, thank you very much for availing yourself this evening, Mr. Naidu. Mr. Kamikamica, thank you very much for representing the People's Alliance, the Deputy Leader of People's Alliance, and Mr. Narube, the Leader of Unity Fiji. The show provides a background on those who want to lead Fiji over the next 4 years, your stand on issues that matter to the people, what you will do. It is about accountability and allowing yourself to be held accountable. My first question, alphabetical order based on the parties. A lot has been said about government debt. It was at over $9 billion as of July this year. Government needs money to fund its initiatives and policies. How will you deal with government debt? Can you tell the people how much will you borrow in year one onwards, and how will you reduce debt? Mr. Chaudhry.
Thank you, Vijay. Yes, government debt is a matter of great concern. Unfortunately, it has ballooned over the last few years to unsustainable levels. What we intend to do is to, in our first year, to borrow locally to fund the deficit. We will not be borrowing abroad. We think that there is local capacity to fund budget deficits. Our foreign reserves are at acceptable levels, and so we will, by not borrowing overseas, we will be reducing the overseas debt at least by 4% in the first year. So that is our strategy, and of course, by growing the economy, by reshaping the economy, we hope to reduce the debt levels further, to increase the government revenue, to reduce expenditure, to cut out wastage, to better the compliance method, revenue compliance, and also to enhance accountability and transparency in governance.
You say you will reduce overseas debt, but you'll increase domestic debt. By what percentage will you increase it? And what will be your total
debt? 15%. The domestic debt will increase by 15%.
By 15%, but you're still saying that you will have lower debt. How can that be?
No, I didn't say that we'll have a lower debt. We'll reduce the deficit. We will cut back on unnecessary expenditure, and we will fund the deficit by local resources.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. Mr. Naidu.
So, Vijay, we talk about the debt as being 9 billion. In fact, there's another billion on top of that, which is contingent liabilities of government, which are debts owed by large corporations such as Fiji Airways, Fiji Sugar, which they're not really in a position to pay. So, in fact, the debt is higher than 9, and it's you might as well say it's 100% of gross domestic product. And Mr. Narube, ex-central banker, will I'm sure tell you that once you've crossed 80% of GDP, the alarm bells go off. Lenders start to get nervous, they stop lending to you. This is not a problem we can fix in a year or 2 years. The point's been made, we have to grow the economy. If you grow the economy, of course, debt as a proportion of GDP comes down and it becomes a little bit more manageable. But this requires a strategy that will take 2 or 3 years. You know, the reality is that there are urgent and pressing concerns on infrastructure. You look at water and sewage, you look at power. We've got some systems, particularly in Suva and other urban areas, which are on the verge of collapse. We cannot avoid the need to borrow, probably from multilateral institutions at low rates of interest, as this government has begun to do, has apparently only just learned how to do. And that's going to be the likely position for the next couple of years. It's not possible to instantly manage that down without severely disrupting the economy. So this is a medium-term problem. It's going to take us 2 or 3 years to get this under control. But there's a whole series of strategies that we will need to follow. And one of the things that we must do is ask. It's really important that we get everybody into the room, all of the stakeholders. We need a national economic summit. We need ideas and contributions from the private sector, from all of the political parties on how we are going to manage this. We've got to stop pretending that the government has all the answers.
Thank you, Mr. Naidu. Mr. Kamikamica, what's People's Alliance?
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps just the first point I'd like to make in terms of our view of the manifesto is that what we've tried to do is ensure that because one of the concerns we have is we don't know what awaits us when we get into government. So what needs to happen is, or what the approach we've taken is to be conservative and try and introduce initiatives within the current envelope of the budget. What that means is in terms of deficit funding, it remains the share of foreign and domestic debt remains the same. But because we've introduced some taxes, there is a reduction, slight reduction in the net deficit as a percentage of GDP from about 7.4% to 7.2%. I think the important issues to share when you're talking about managing the debt is one, it is not a short-term problem. It is a medium to long-term problem. So a couple of things that People's Alliance government will do. One is look at the wastage that is happening in government. Some professionals say that it's up to $500 million in terms of wastage. If that is true, therein lies some opportunity to address the debt concerns. In other words, we can start perhaps looking at reducing the debt. The second is, which is the larger question is, and this is, Richard's shared this, is the need to grow the cake. It's interesting, I have an article here that the governor of the Reserve Bank at Topex said that beyond tourism, there is no other industry. And therein is the problem. The country or the government has failed to diversify the economy.
We'll talk about that in greater detail later on. Mr. Narube.
Yeah, when you talk about that, I think we need to take a backward step and say, what has caused the debt? What is the reason for this high debt? And when you take that step, you realize that debt is created by spending more than what you earn. And this government is a spending government, right from day one. I know that. I worked with them for 2.5 years. They started to spend very seriously. And that is what has created this debt. So when you spend that money, you need to really look at the impact of spending on the economy, the efficiency of government spending. Because of the high wastage that has gone with the high spending, the impact of government spending on the economy is much lower than what it is. So it does two things. First, the debt payment crowds out the essential expenses. That's already happening. 44 cents in every dollar that we give government in taxes are channeled to paying debt. So that's one thing. And the second, if we do not improve the efficiency of expenses by reducing wages, we're going to hit a brick wall soon. You're right. Debt to GDP is now close to 100% without contingency liabilities. You put all the contingent liability, my calculation is 110% of GDP. That is 110%. So that's serious debt, which needs to be repaid. The problem about that is that given the low efficiency of government spending on debt, we will not be able to finance that higher level of debt. More and more money will be needed to pay debt than to go to essential spending. That is where we have the problem. So for us, we go to the root of it, go to the spending of government, reduce that, improve the efficiency or the wastage, take away the wastage, and improve the services.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. Contingent liabilities are actually loans taken by certain companies that are guaranteed by government. So that's why contingent liabilities also play a part. Now, on to the next question, Mr. Kamikamica. Total estimated government revenue for 2022-2023 financial year is $2.939 billion. The total expenditure is $3.812 billion. What is your plan for revenue? Where are you expecting to get increased revenue?
Yeah, like I said, Vijay, the approach that the People's Alliance has taken is a very conservative approach in the first year. And that's premised on the fact that we really don't know what awaits us in government. So to fund our proposals as per our manifesto, we've done two things. We've introduced an increase in corporate tax by 5%, but the bulk of our funding comes from a reallocation of the current budget. That is not new to government. That is something that is currently done. And what we've done through that exercise is identified about 290 million worth of reallocations that can be done based on government expenditure.
Where will you be shifting?
We're looking at critical areas. So funding of the USP debt. We're looking at funding of plans in health. We're looking at expanding investment into agriculture, rural development, putting aside money for women's rights issues, sexual discrimination, looking at more MSME funding for youth and women. We need to continue to activate that. So we basically reallocated funding because it's very critical for the country to understand is that we are not in a position to make major promises. That's coming from the People's Alliance. We need to be careful with what we promise. I think we are doing that in our manifesto. Once we get in, and then we'll have a fuller understanding of what is there.
Thank you very much. Mr. Narube. Question on where are you expecting to get increased revenue?
We are not going to touch revenue. I don't think it's the time to be touching revenue. You don't want to increase revenue when the economy is down. You want to increase spending in the economy. So we're not touching revenue. We are touching expenses because that is where the levers are.
So no new taxes,
no
no
new
new
taxes,
duties,
no new duties.
no reductions.
Yeah. So what
no
we will
increases.
do on revenue front, we will redistribute taxes away from the poor to the rich. So it's a redistribution that we are on, not so much an increase. So on the net impact, it's the same. So we are reducing income taxes for the poor, the lower income, and taking and increasing taxes to the super rich. And that's what we're doing. So we're not touching taxes. This is not the right time to be touching taxes as now.
We'll talk about personal income tax. That's a separate issue altogether. Mr. Naidu.
So Vijay, I want to pick up points made by both of the preceding speakers. I think Manoa is right. We don't actually know what's in there. We don't have enough information. A lot of government finances are opaque. They're not transparent. The information has not been shared. So in terms of how much revenue ought to be raised, how much expenditure ought to be cut, we've got to get in there, open the books, share the problems with the public, and then look at what we're going to do. I think what Mr. Narube said is right. It's not a good time to be raising revenue when the economy is still on its knees. It's looking critically at expenditure that's important. Zero-based budgeting is important. We don't simply look at what we spent last year and add 5%. We go right back to the bottom and we start again. Is every item of expenditure in this department or that ministry necessary? You've got to look critically at the budget, the expenditure, the way it's all spent, the structure of the department, and say, why are we spending 10 million here? Why are we spending 20 million there? I mean, we look at your rivals at FBC, who seem to get an awful lot of money for so-called public broadcasting. Walesi, it seems to me, is a complete overspending disaster. You know, there's a whole lot of things that we have to look at in each ministry and not simply say we're going to tweak this or tweak that. We've got to restructure and look critically at the way everything is spent.
Mr. Chaudhry.
I think some steps need to be taken to enhance government revenue. If you're talking about debt reduction, then you have to do that. And tax reforms are necessary. Government needs revenue to provide services. And it is quite fair to raise taxes without hurting the poor. To those who have the ability to pay tax should pay fair tax. So what we propose to do in our budget, we are providing for a revenue of 3.181 billion against expenditure of 3.986 billion, with estimated net deficit of 804 million, which is 6.5% of the GDP. Now that's what we propose to do. Now, how do we raise this revenue? I think we want to start looking at it right from the beginning. We can't say we'll do this later or what. We must have a plan, which we must put into action as we go. And what we propose to do is to introduce a progressive income tax structure while continuing the $30,000 tax threshold, maintaining it. So people earning below $30,000 will pay no tax. Now, review tax holidays and incentives to create a level playing field. At the moment, we have a lot of concessions, tax concessions and incentives. And international financial institutions have been advising the government for some years now that we are giving away too much. We're giving away too much. So we will need to create a level playing field. You can't have tax holidays for 13 years, again 20 years, extend them, keep extending it, because it's not fair on the people who are paying their taxes. So we intend to standardize corporate tax at 20%, increase trade tax on non-essential imports. I think that's very important because non-essential imports cost us quite a bit in terms of outflow of foreign currency. So we've got to discourage non-essential imports. And we will reinstate service turnover tax to redress the imbalance between the services and other sectors of the economy. And finally, widen capital gains tax on sale and transfer of investment assets. There are a lot of exemptions in the capital gains tax, which I think need to be attended to. We'll ensure that no VAT on basic food items, including baby food and medicines, and we will not increase VAT rate.
And these tax changes will happen when, if you do come into government, you will bring these tax changes in the new year?
Yes, we consider that these reforms are necessary. One of the reasons why we are, we have so much deficit, we are borrowing so much, is because we are not, we don't have a level playing field with regard to revenue. We're giving away too much in concessions and in incentives, and we have a what do you call? What shall I say? We make too many concessions.
I think you made your point about concessions and government losing revenue. Now, going to the next question, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, 24.1% or 208,021 people or 45,744 households were living on or below the poverty line. The basic needs poverty line is $41.91 per adult equivalent per week. This is according to the 2019-2020 Household Income and Expenditure Survey, and prior to COVID-19. We had increasing prices due to freight rates, disruptions due to global events, other factors including wage increases. How will you deal with those struggling to put food on the table and increasing prices? Mr. Narube.
There are two sides to poverty. Basically, the spending, part the cost of goods and items that a household consumes in a day, and the second is its income that it gets to pay for that. So we need to tackle both sides of the equation. On the cost side, this government has done nothing. So the burden of the high cost of living has been transferred straight to the people. That adds to poverty. That poverty figure that you quoted, Vijay, is underestimated. The real poverty is at around 40% after all this, the higher cost of living and the lower incomes because of incomes have plummeted. So we need to address the cost, and we're doing that through price control mechanisms and also reducing the custom duties on certain items. So that helps reduce the cost. But the most important part is also the income part. And that's the income that the take-home pay, that we are increasing the threshold of taxes from $30,000 to $40,000. And we are also removing the no job policy to allow people to work. So those are the kind of things that we're raising the living wages to $5 an hour, and we are linking allowances to inflation. So that's on the income side. We need to attack both sides of the equation.
Mr. Naidu.
So, Vijay, I think you made an important point in your introduction, which was that the 24% poverty rate was before COVID. We don't have the numbers after the COVID pandemic and the disaster that that's inflicted on poor people. I think the first point to make is that investing in support for poor people is good economics, even from a government viewpoint, because if we make welfare payments, if we give financial support to poor people, that comes back as a multiplier, because the poorest people spend all the money that they give. The question then, I guess, of what we do is this. This government has simply thrown money at the problem and said, we've solved it. So you get these $180 payments, you get help for homes, you get people taking out their FNPF, and we know that that money has been poorly directed. We know that it's been poorly spent. It is not a joke when we say that when those payments come out, the sales of alcohol spike in the shops. So we know that the money is not well directed. What we need is a much better strategy, and again, it's one of partnership. You look at all of the organizations that are out there that are assisting poor people, people who have been affected by COVID. You look at Sashi Kiran, right, who used to be at Friend. You look at the welfare organizations and how they work with the poor. They have the knowledge, they have the depth, they have the passion, they have the commitment. They have been doing the work on the ground. It's for government to partner with those organizations and create some synergy. Not just to throw money at the problem and tell everybody, look how much money we've spent. Again, if you talk to Sashi, and Sashi will talk about this for a long time, you've also got to get people into income generation. It's not enough to just keep throwing money at people. What are you going to do for them to actually get them out of the poverty trap? So the key is to change the whole game, work in partnership with all of the people in the community, all of the community organizations that are already working with the poor. Give them the support. Just be smarter with the way we spend our money.
Mr. Chaudhry.
I think we need to have a social safety net to take care of the people who are really financially challenged. And for this, we propose to raise the welfare payments to $200 per month. At the moment, you have some people get $30, some get $90, some get $100. That is inadequate. We have one single rate of welfare payment, which will be $200 per month. Secondly, when we talk about reducing poverty, we must create opportunities. We must provide for jobs. We must grow the economy. We must use our productive resources. We must invest in our productive resources, productive sectors of the economy to create these jobs. Poverty will not go away simply by spending here and there. We must have a holistic approach to reducing poverty. And we have a plan to what we call that is return to rural. When you look at our rural sector, there are a lot of opportunities there. But this government has not been investing in the rural sector. A lot of our people who were having a reasonably good life were forced to come to cities looking for jobs and opportunities because there was hardly any investment in the rural sector. The rural sector was not growing. Too much emphasis was on tourism. And because of this neglect of the rural sector, so what we propose to do is to create projects. One of the things is, I'll take you back to what was done in Sianganga. Sianganga was funded through a World Bank loan during the Ratumara's time, and land was obtained on lease. It was cleared, and it was made productive, and then people will resettle there. Now we propose to do the same sort of thing by creating commercial agricultural farms of 3 to 5 acres and resettling people in the rural areas. You can't expect them to go there, clear the land, and find money to start doing things in a productive way. They just don't have the money. We've got to assist them. So resettling the people back into rural areas.
Mr. Chaudhry. Mr. Kamikamica.
Yeah, thank you. I guess to your question on the social safety net side, People Alliance is committing to maintaining the current social safety net. Again, because we don't know what's awaiting us when we get in. So apart from that, we're obviously looking at price control and just reviewing the whole basket of goods again and seeing what can be done in that respect. So that will cover the expenditure side. On the income side, clearly we need to create jobs for our people. Some of the initiatives that we have come up with, one is we will try and turbocharge any investments that are currently sitting on the table. So that will be infrastructure, agriculture, or any sort of investment opportunities. We will try and accelerate that. We are putting money into rural development, primarily targeted at generating income for people in the rural setting. We are introducing a apprenticeship scheme, which will be a way of starting to create employment with our younger people, giving them opportunities to get skilled work. So those are some of the types of initiatives we are looking at.
Thank you. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break.
What I did in 2006 is to clean up the mess in the study.
When there has been Itoke leadership, everybody has been embraced.
He cannot stomach the fact that he is not in government.
You said that you couldn't pay out bonuses, but this shows an increase in board directors' fees.
You are wanting to lead the country, not me. I'm asking you the question again, back to corporal punishment. Right. What's your stand on it?
DG First cannot intervene into a personal matter.
Absolutely you can for small businesses.
I was very surprised when he came out with that statement that I would conduct a coup if I lose. Not
Hand
me.
on your heart.
It's him.
No, you're a joke.
No, you are a joke.
You're a joke.
You're a joke. Don't bring that up. We don't.
No, I gotta bring it up. You were commander.
But yes,
Every military officer and serviceman at the time was under your
you've
command.
forgotten you trained them.
Bulavinaka, this is Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan.
Fiji Village Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. Sponsored by Salt and Pepper Home Decor. Living in high quality. Watch it live on the Fiji Village Facebook page. Download the all-new Fiji Village app. Get the latest news direct to your mobile. Get the latest sports updates from our scoreboards online. Navigate easily through our categories. Watch videos from Straight Talk interviews, local music videos, sports, and many more. You can now easily listen to your favorite radio stations from your phone. Download the all-new Fiji Village app right now.
Bulavinaka, I'm Vijay Narayan. As Fiji goes to the polls, we at Fiji Village are committed to bringing you fair, accurate, and balanced coverage of the issues that matter. Visit the Fiji Votes 2022 section on Fiji Village for all the latest on the 2022 Fijian general elections.
Download the all-new Fiji Village app right now.
Welcome back. This is Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. Tonight we are talking about the economy and the Fiji Labour Party leader, Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry, Mr. Richard Naidu, who is the National Federation Party's a leading member of the party's think tank, Mr. Manoa Kamikamica, the deputy leader of People's Alliance, and Mr. Savenaca Narube, the leader of Unity Fiji, are in attendance. We have two empty chairs. Invited Fiji First Party General Secretary Ayasayed Kayum, who did not send through any confirmation, so we do not have him here, and also Sodelpa had confirmed and later withdrew their nominated candidate for tonight. Going into the next question, the total value of goods and services produced by the country is the gross domestic product, GDP. The total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced by Fiji based on your assessment, and we talked about this when we addressed the first issue of debt, about growing the cake. Where do you see real growth? What sectors will you be targeting? And what is your party's target level, Mr. Naidu?
Thanks, Vijay. I just want to make one point, actually, that I should have made before the break, which is that there has been a lot of misleading information about NFP, and I think People's Alliance. It's been alleged that we're going to cut welfare payments. We're not. That's not humane. It's not even good economics to do that. So welfare payments will stay the same. In fact, we're looking for ways to add value to them. So that to one side. In terms of how we grow the economic base, well, gosh, how long have I got? The point's been made earlier that we are too reliant on tourism. And unfortunately, the government has become seduced by tourism to the exclusion of everything else. And hasn't been able to make the most of the opportunities. Now, if you actually look at what Biman has been saying for the last 10 years, it seems that the government is only now just coming to the party. When we talk about, for example, business process outsourcing, call centers, we talk about medical tourism, we talk about forestry, we talk about sustainable agriculture. You know, the organic market, the market for organic goods, Vijay, is $200 billion US, the global market. And it is growing at the rate of 12% a year. If we could get 1% of that market, we would transform our economy instantly. That would be $4 billion. 4 billion Fiji dollars on an economy the size of 10 billion. There are just so many opportunities that we have simply not paid attention to because the government is not listening. The government insists that it's the smartest person in the room. The ideas that we've come up with are not our own ideas. They're ideas that we get from listening to others. So, if you want to know where we look to grow the economy, obviously, when you are a small tropical country, we have lots of land for agriculture, we have a good image thanks to products like Fiji water, which actually enhance our image around the world. We have a brand. We have opportunities if we're simply allowed, to make the most of them. Look at business process outsourcing. In the last 13 years since we took it seriously, we've created, and Manoa will know better than me, less than 10,000 jobs. In that time, South Africa has created 250,000. These are the opportunities that we are missing, both on the services side and on the goods side. If we just look at three markets, Australia, New Zealand, and the west coast of the United States, these are all wealthy markets. These are markets where we have good interconnectivity in terms of airlines, in terms of freight by sea, in terms of telecommunications. Those three on their own, if we could integrate our economies better, our tax policies, our investment policies, if we could reorient our promotion, make sure that we've got the right diplomats in the right places, the right trade promotion authorities, in those three markets alone, that would be a start. That would, I think as Manoa said it, turbocharge growth. So we've got to be smarter about what we do and how we do it, and also where we do it.
Thank you. Mr. Chaudhry?
We intend to build local capacity for sustainable growth. We'll be concentrating on small and medium enterprises to expand, and also we'll be looking at local manufacturing, because this is one sector which has potential, and will be a shift in emphasis from services to manufacturing for import substitution. We are importing quite a bit, and there are imports that are non-essential. There are things that we are importing which we can manufacture here locally, so we will be concentrating on local manufacturing, IT development. IT sector has great export potential, so that is another thing that we'll be looking at. And film, TV and music, grants for artists to create more and better quality local content for domestic and export markets. We have a lot of talented people who can be self-employed. We're looking at establishing an academy of arts, sports and culture, which will be developing, which will be assisting our local artists and sportsmen and women to develop their talents and become self-employed. We will also be looking at tourism, particularly local tourism. There is great potential there. At the moment, this area is neglected. A lot of people want to travel within Fiji, but it is not affordable. So we will be looking at how to increase domestic tourism. We'll be also looking at doing ease of business to promote the private sector growth, and there are a number of other areas in which I think there is potential. Action plan for capital markets to better utilize domestic savings for investment, which will all contribute to private sector growth and create opportunities which will...
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. Mr. Kamikamica?
Thank you, Vijay. I guess I think one of the points that Richard made is quite important when you talk about diversifying the economy, and that is you really need it to be private sector driven. Up till now, government seems to think that it knows everything. Just to give you some examples of the opportunities, BPO is a great one. The actual market out of Australia for BPO is about US 38 billion US dollars. Just imagine us being close by if we were able to access about 5% of that or 10% of that. The initial discussions for BPO, the BPO sector, was in 2009. I've got some documentation here from the Accountants Congress. The government totally missed the boat on the BPO sector. That's an opportunity that's lost. We are trying to catch up. It'll take a few years to catch up, but there in itself is a great opportunity. One of the other things that we need to accelerate when we talk about BPO or technological opportunities is there's a second cable that needs to be established in Fiji. This will enhance our destination as a destination that becomes a tier 1 destination. At the moment we have only one connection into Fiji. We'll have 2 connections. That means data warehousing, the Googles, these big IT companies can come to Fiji. What does that mean? That means that we can create other jobs in Fiji for our young people, technologically advanced kind of jobs. So there's a big opportunity there. I don't know why this government has been mucking around with the second cable. They need to get going. As soon as we get in, there will be a big priority for us because it will transform Fiji. Data costs will come down dramatically, and it actually brings us straight into the 21st century. Apart from that, agriculture is a big opportunity for Fiji. There's so much arable land. For the life of me, I don't know why this government doesn't reach out to agricultural giants like the Israelis and tap into their technology. We know that climate change is a big issue in Fiji. We need to be looking at technological agriculture, commercial agriculture, that can allow us to actually play when climate change is upon us. Manufacturing opportunities, again, I was in Sydney, in Melbourne just recently. I got approached by someone who's interested in developing high-tech manufacturing in Fiji. So, there's so many opportunities. There's medical tourism, that's another great opportunity. Import replacement. Crest has and Red Rooster have proven in Fiji that we can be self-sufficient in a commodity, livestock commodity, which is chicken, to the point now where they are exporting offshore. So Yangara, for example, Fiji Water's been wanting to operate Yangara for some time. I'm not sure why they haven't been given an opportunity, or at least tender it out, so that we can look at a commercial entity that can actually run it properly and create an economy or a product that can lead to self-sufficiency in meat. Steaks like the Vanuatu steak. Why can't we have a Fiji steak for the tourism market? So certainly in terms of diversification, there's a lot of opportunities for Fiji, and in some respects, and I always say this, there are companies already in Fiji that are able to actually facilitate some of this for us.
Thank you, Mr. Kamikamica. Mr. Narube.
Yeah, this is one of the Achilles heels of economic performance of this government, the lack of diversification. It has created enormous issues for everybody, including poverty. So for us, our simple solution, use natural resources. We have what we call the Economic Transformation Program, which is integrated to provide us with the incomes, particularly in the rural areas where 60% of our poor people live. That's what we are calling Economic Transformation Program. It basically has 5 pillars. The first is that we provide the machines. So we go into commercial farming level. The second, we establish processing centers to value add to those basic products. And we find markets with the help of government. Third, we provide the capital. We're thinking of establishing a commercial bank specifically targeting that particular segment of the economy. And lastly, we want to change the mindsets of people so they can take full advantage of those pillars. So that's, to me, is an integrated program that haven't been implemented in the past. There's many past attempts at doing it for our natural resources, but they have miserably failed. Why? Because they were piecemeal, they were not integrated, not enough, let's put it there. So to us, to Unity Fiji, that is a no-brainer. We have the resources, we have the land. It's just a matter of putting together that program that will help us achieve economic growth in the rural areas. When there is a growth of processing centers, it will draw commercial interest into the rural areas and will, to me, discourage people from moving to the urban centers. It will provide jobs for the rural people, for them to exploit this. So to me, it will double GDP in 4 years. That's our challenge. Double GDP in 4 years. That means jobs, a lot of that. Develop the rural areas. And that will provide employment and prevent this urban drift that's creating a lot of problems for urban infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narube. We do apologize to all our viewers for the Straight Talk live stream going down earlier, and we assure you the full video will be posted here straight after the show as well. Now, just on to my next question. What are your specific plans for land development? We've talked about agriculture, including sugar. We've had questions come in that a lot of land is lying idle after the sugar leases expired. According to statistics, sugarcane production, the highest in about 1997 was at 4.5 million tons. Last year it was 1.4 million tons. That's sugar alone. Of course, there's other things that we can go into. The kava industry is growing and many others. But people are saying it's the availability of land lying idle, access to land. How can we encourage landowners and also people who want to lease land to do that? Mr. Chaudhry, what will you do? Do you have a plan?
Security of land tenure as far as agriculture is concerned is very important. If you want people to invest in agriculture, then they must have secure tenancy and tenancy for a reasonable period of time. Right now, under Agricultural Landlord and Tenant Act, the period of agricultural leases is 30 years. Now, 30 years is not long enough. I think we need to look at it and increase it to maybe 50 years. And that will certainly attract more people to come and invest in agriculture. Land has always been a sensitive issue. A lot of land which was productive, particularly in the sugarcane industry, that has now become unproductive because of non-renewal of leases. And we've got to come to grips with this problem and see how best we can address it. Developing land means that there has to be investment by the government. The people don't have enough money to clear land and make it productive and start farming. So there has to be state assistance. As I said earlier, that our return to rural policy, creating commercial farms, which is the best way forward, which will solve also the employment problem. It will also solve housing problems because it will start, the people will be going back to rural areas from squatter settlements. So that's the approach we are proposing. And of course, growing the sugar industry is very important because I think there's a lot of potential there. And of course, it will take some work to get people again to start coming back to the industry because of the problems that they faced, non-renewal of leases, etc. And because of the problems currently associated with the sugar industry, where the farmers have been sidelined without a voice, the institutions in which they had representatives, like the Growers Council, the Sugar Commission of Fiji, the Sugar Marketing Company, the Mill Area Committees, were all disbanded by the Bainimarama government in 2010. So the farmers have no voice in the running of the industry. We've got to democratize the industry, and we've got to have the stakeholders have a say in the running of the industry, particularly farmers, who actually are 70% owners of the industry, who are supplying the raw materials and all that.
Do you believe by doing that, sugar industry will hit back again?
Well, a lot more has to be done because you need to also diversify the industry. The aside from sugar cane, there also should be encouraged to plant other crops to give them regular income. So, as you know, under the payment system in the sugar industry, there are 5 payments in a year. So you get your money in bits and pieces, and it could be for as long as 15 to 18 months by the time you get full payment for your crop. So these are areas which need to be addressed to get the sugar industry back on feet and grow it. If you grow the sugar industry, it's not just making sugar. We can also look at ethanol production. In 2007, there was a Japanese company was interested in setting up an ethanol processing plant in Lautoka Mill. But that fell out, and I think if we expand sugar, we should be looking at value-adding sugar. You produce brown sugar or special sugars, but at the same time we can be doing ethanol, and this will reduce our fuel bill. You can mix ethanol with imported fuel, and this will reduce the fuel bill. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. Mr. Naidu.
So, Vijay, it's interesting. You just listen to the four ideas around this table. And then imagine if we multiply that and we actually go out to the country through the form of an economic summit or some other form of consultation and gather in these ideas and start to put together a plan. Because that's what's been lacking for 16 years. We've had a government that simply says, we're going to do it our way and we don't care what anybody else says. Let's talk about land development. Let's talk about the sugar industry. I think in terms of quantity, we will probably never go back to those days in the 1990s, because I think there are a lot of farmers who want to come off the land now. They want to do different things. But what we actually have to do with the sugar industry is make the most of the talent that we have. We've got deep, generations-old talent in cane farming. How then do we add value? You know, for more than 100 years, we've been doing the same thing in the sugar industry. We have been growing cane, we have been crushing it and sending brown sugar to the other side of the world. That's an economic model that doesn't work anymore. We talked about ethanol. The Mauritians produce rum. They're taking their product right up the value chain. Why aren't we doing the same thing? So with respect to sugar, certainly there is still life in the industry, but I think it will be a smaller industry, but it will be and has to be an industry that adds more value for everybody in the industry. The farmers, the manufacturers, everybody who is involved.
Mr. Narube.
Yeah, land is simply an asset. It's simply a factor of production. Remove politics from it. It is simply that. On one side we have tenants, on the other side we have the owners. So that we strike a balance there on a commercial fair value. And that's been missing in this country. We've been talking about altar leases. It needs to be increased. And we have that in our manifesto. That the lease period needs to be increased. So, but you have to also look at the landowner's point of view. If we increase that, what is the compensation to the landowners? That part of the equation has been missing. And you've seen many of our landowners sitting there virtually in poverty because of that. So we need to really reinvent this and put the land squarely. That is a commercial asset that needs to be dealt with at a commercial level. If there's any subsidy that needs to go in there, it has to be explicit. It has to be borne by someone, and that is government. So that, to me, is a commercial approach to land. There's too much politics about it over the years. That complicates the issue. We talk about sugar. The sugar, as we all know, have very fundamental problems. The cost of producing sugar is way too much. FSC as a sugar model is very, very inefficient. We know that. The mills are all needs to be replaced. So what we are doing, we're bringing sugar, agriculture, whatever you have into our economic transformation program. Put it there. We help them through machines, we help them through processing, value adding, and so forth. Capital, as I mentioned before. So we bring sugar into that, bring ginger into it, bring cover into the whole thing. So to us, that is where the model is that will generate and transform the entire economy. Our secret of our successes is here, not abroad. So we need to exploit that. And we have a model that will enable us to do that.
Mr. Kamikamica, what's the People's Alliance plan?
Yeah, thank you. I guess in terms of land development, obviously at the end of the day, there has to be a fine balance between the landowner or the lessor and the lessee. And so any discussions around land tenure need to be looked at in terms of what the ultimate return is for the landowner. I think, Vijay, for me, in terms of land development, I think it's important that we look at it through the lens of how are we going to drive the economic development, whether it's real estate development, whether it's agriculture. And I think one of the fundamental things that's been missing, particularly in agricultural development, is getting on board major private sector players that can actually build industry for us. At the moment, it seems to be led by government-led initiatives, and it falls flat. For example, this is just an example, a hypothetical example. Assume Yangara is taken over by Fiji Water. Government talks to Fiji Water and says, how about you start looking at all large tracts of land around Fiji, identify certain areas. Wainimbuka is a big area that has major tracts of land. Let's build another cattle farm there and work with the landowners to start rearing their own cattle and providing product back to the Angara mill. Just imagine what they'll do. All of a sudden, you've got putting money in the pockets of the landowners in their settings, and you create meaningful livelihoods for them. And we can do that with a lot of other things. Not only that, there's vanilla, there's cocoa. These are products that if we find the right partners, we can actually do it as a country. What we also need to do is, Richard touched on it, look at the Fiji water model. We need to look at high-end product or commodities, not sort of lower-end commodities, because we are an isolated country, and as an isolated country, margins are thin if you have a low priced commodity. So I think in terms of land development, we can do a lot, but I think we need to relook at how we are doing it and seriously think about strategic partnerships with operators that are in Fiji, and if they're not in Fiji, outside Fiji, that can really genuinely push agricultural development that uses land, and we drive returns directly into the hands of the landowners.
You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. In studio tonight we have Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry, the leader of Fiji Labour Party, Mr. Richard Naidu, NFP's leading member of the think tank, Mr. Manoa Kamikamica, the deputy leader of People's Alliance, and Mr. Savenaca Narube, the leader of Unity Fiji. Mr. Naidu, a lot has been said on wastage of government funds. In your analysis, where is the wastage and what will you reduce?
Where do you start? I think if you operate in the private sector as we do, and we watch how government works, we're just constantly amazed at how inefficient the processes are. That's not the fault of the public servants. That is the fault of the system, the completely frozen system. There are processes in government that haven't changed for 50 years. Everything's still being done on paper. Everybody's still having meetings. The whole notion of having meetings on Zoom or Teams seems to be still alien to government processes. A civil servant still needs the permission of the permanent secretary to go overseas. It's 2022. It's not 1956. And so these are all of the processes that have just got to be completely relooked at and modernized. And from that, I think a lot of efficiencies will come. It's crazy that all of central government operates in central Suva. Why aren't we putting government offices in places like Navua, Nasinu, places outside of Suva, where people don't have to travel for an hour and a half and be caught in traffic jams 2 times a day, where the rents are lower, where we can make use of electronic communications. There's just so many ways in which we can just completely transform the way government operates, and the savings will come. The business community, the private sector, has done this 20, 30, 40 years ago. But in government, we seem to be doing the same thing. Vijay, this is one of my favorite statistics, but in terms of how the government operates, in 2006, there's a well-known World Bank index, the Ease of Doing Business Index. In 2006, Fiji was ranked 36th out of about 190 countries for ease of doing business. 36th in the world, not bad. Now our ranking is 102, 16 years later. But it gets worse. Think of the ease of starting a business. Now, again, the World Bank ranks countries. In 2006, I think we were around 55, 56. Now we are down to 162. We are ranked 162. There's only 190 countries, and we are ranked at 162. That gives you an idea of the loss of efficiency, because of course, while we've been allegedly reforming things, other countries have been moving ahead. They've been transforming their public service, they've been transforming their regulatory environment. And that just gives you an idea of how far we have fallen behind. Why? Because we don't listen. Because the government will not listen to the private sector, will not consult with the private sector. The private sector believes in regulation, because regulation is generally good for business as long as it's the right level. But over-regulation doesn't work. And that's what's costing us money, it's what's costing us investment.
Any targets on wastage? There's some numbers being thrown around. This is the level of wastage in the budget every year.
Yeah, I think Biman's estimate is that it's about $500 million that we can probably bridge by means of cutting down wasteful expenditure and possibly looking at enhancing revenue. So you go both ways. And there's probably $500 million that you could make.
Mr. Narube.
Well, this is my favorite topic. I've been talking about it for the last 3 years. In our alternative budget, and we are the first in our history to prepare as an opposition party an alternative budget 2 years ago, and we highlighted this issue of wastage. We identified where it should come from, where we see the wastage. We have done our homework. We have gone into the budget allocation itself, where we have seen this. First, the transfers to public companies, operation and capital transfers. That's about 600 million every year that goes there. It goes to corporations like the Fiji Broadcasting Corporation. So that's one thing that we will need to really cut back. We need to reform these organizations to make them stand on their own 2 feet. The second is on roads. We have seen $400 million of allocation to roads. Where are they? Where have they gone? So to us, there's a lot of that that could be saved. The third is vehicle. Vehicle used to be, when I was the Permanent Secretary of Finance, around $2 million a year. You know where it is now? It's $30 million a year. And it's leased. It's not even owned by government. The third is that the government has a state law office. What are they doing hiring a private firm to do their legal work? That's to me, it doesn't make sense. And we have the Ministry of Information that needs to look at the public relations side of it. Why do we need to hire another public relation company from the US at $2 million a year? We have the Pacific Development Forum They're sitting out there in a CSA. We're allocating $2 million to it. It's doing virtually nothing. So these are some examples, including in that is our missions abroad. Why do we establish missions in countries we don't have relationship, let alone a trade relationship? Why do you have that? We have just closed Papua New Guinea, which is our closest ally in the Pacific. We trade a lot, but we still have Abu Dhabi or wherever it is as a mission. Where's the logic in it? So there's a lot to be said. We calculated it then and we calculate it now. We can save at least $1 billion a year from this wastage.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. Mr. Kamikamica.
Yeah, I'll try not to sound as similar as Mr. Narube, but I kind of had the same dot points. But I think, firstly, one of the areas where there's genuine concern is just the way capital expenditure is being expended by this government. Two quick examples that are normally bandied around. That's in the Lautoka swimming pool saga. Started off in 2015 at 2.5 million. It's now 12.5 million, still not completed. Water Authority digger, leased for 15 months, I think, 33 million. Our leader talks about just a deep dive or a review of current commitments. I suspect there's a lot of issues with some of those commitments. In terms of the embassies, yes, they closed Papua New Guinea. There's a couple of thousand people from Fiji in Papua New Guinea. We have a deep relationship with Papua New Guinea. Vodafone's now there. There's investment interest like BSP Life is being there's a big investor from BSP Bank, owns BSP Bank here. So there's some very deep relationships there. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why that was closed. Washington, D.C. is another classic example. It's a key partner. They closed that. And yet we have other embassies, to Mr. Narube's point, that are in existence for not too sure what sort of justification. In terms of sugar, the Fiji People's Alliance has committed to a really big review of sugar because of the level of subsidies that we are pumping into the sugar industry. From my estimates, currently it's about 50 million a year. If we try and look at efficiencies, we look at transforming the industry, maybe right-sizing it. What if we can save 25 million? That's a massive saving. There's also the vehicle leasing bit that Mr. Narube mentioned. We are phasing it out from day one. We will scale it down and then phase it out totally. I noticed in one of the budget allocations, they actually had vehicles from China that was donated. So how do you reconcile a $30 million lease payment every year with FOC vehicles coming into the transport pool? There's the capital allocations to the Roads Authority. That needs to be looked at carefully. Mr. Narube is correctly allocated to a major allocation every year. You just have to look at what's happening on the Coral Coast at the moment. Perfectly good roads have been ripped up and being resealed at the moment. In Sawani, they're starting to rip up parts of the road and reseal. What on earth for? So these are the type of
$1.5 billion road.
And obviously there's Govis that we are going to remove as soon as we get in. It's an expenditure that's totally unnecessary. So, from our perspective, just looking at some of these opportunities, I think you could actually get up to 400 to 500 million in terms of savings. again, and this is a point that Richard made quite strongly, one of the things that the People's Alliance and NFP want to do is to just sit down at the table, discuss things at an economic summit, listen to all the ideas, and I am certain that we'll identify more in terms of what we can say.
Thank you, Mr. Kamikamica. Mr. Chaudhry.
I think the answers are given by my colleagues here. It's covered the question pretty well. But I'd like to raise the question of official corruption. I think we are losing a hell of a lot of money through corrupt practices. And corruption is both in the public and in the private sector. It's the private sector which corrupts the public sector. So the digger scam, as mentioned by Mr. Kamikamica, the raw market, it's a sabu market scam. The rebuilding of schools after Cyclone Winston, you'd be surprised at the cost per square foot of building schools exceeded the cost of per square foot of building a 5-star hotel room. Now there's something definitely wrong there. So we are losing huge amount of money, in terms of several millions of dollars, through corrupt practices. Now tied to this is the fact that there is provision in the Constitution for the enactment of a code of conduct legislation, which applies to holders of high public office. We have also in the provision in the Constitution for the appointment of an Accountability and Transparency Commission. The Constitution now is 80 years old, but we neither have Code of Conduct legislation, nor do we have the Accountability and Transparency Commission appointed. Why? To me it seems a deliberate act on the part of this government. They don't want accountability and transparency.
What will you do?
We'll have to...
You'll bring those in, the Code of
Yes,
Conduct?
you have to bring this in. So corruption is a huge problem, and we have to be talking more about it. We cannot just brush it under the carpet. It's a fact, and this has to be tackled, and I hope that any incoming government that comes in will have a tight control over its, over corruption, official corruption.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. This is Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break.
What I did in 2006 is to clean up the mess in the study.
When there's been Itoke leadership, everybody has been embraced.
He cannot stomach the fact that he is not in government.
You said that you couldn't pay out bonuses, but this shows an increase in board directors' fees.
You are wanting to lead the country, not me. I'm asking you the question again, back to corporal punishment. Right. What's your stand on it?
Fiji First cannot intervene into a personal matter.
Absolutely you can for small businesses.
I was very surprised when he came out with that statement that I would conduct a coup if I lose. Not
Hand
me.
on your heart.
It's him.
No, you're a joke.
No, you are a joke.
You're a joke.
You're a joke. Don't bring that up.
No, I gotta bring it up. You were commander.
But yes,
Every military officer and serviceman at the time was under your
you've
command.
forgotten you trained them.
Bulavinaka, this is Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan.
Fiji Village Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. Sponsored by Salt and Pepper Home Decor. Living in high quality. Watch it live on the Fiji Village Facebook page. Download the all-new Fiji Village app. Get the latest news direct to your mobile. Get the latest sports updates from our scoreboards online. Navigate easily through our categories. Watch videos from Straight Talk interviews, local music videos, sports, and many more. You can now easily listen to your favorite radio stations from your phone. Download the all-new Fiji Village app right now.
Welcome back. I'm Vijay Narayan. This is Fiji Village Straight Talk, and we are talking about the economy. Of course, breaking it down into different issues for you to understand what these parties who are in attendance tonight have to offer. We had extended invites to the parties who are in attendance here with the People's Alliance, the Fiji Labour Party, the National Federation Party, Unity Fiji Party, Fiji First Party, no response, no confirmation from Fiji First, and Sodelpa, they had confirmed. Leader then, they said, tied up in Nandronga, will be coming in later for the leaders' debate, but the Sodelpa nominee for tonight's Straight Talk, then the name was withdrawn late last night. So that's why there's 2 empty seats here. Now, personal income tax threshold, people would want to know their take-home pay. Currently, if people earn $30,000 or less, they do not pay any taxes. A quick question here, gentlemen. Mr. Manoa Kamikamica, People's Alliance, what's your stand on personal income tax threshold?
Thank you, Vijay. What the People's Alliance would like to do is very quickly introduce the National Economic Summit, and then from that start looking at a fiscal review to actually look at taxes as a broad subject. But in terms of current taxes, no change. The $30,000 threshold stays, but the premise to that is we will have a good look at it once we get in. Again, we are in at this stage making a lot of suppositions without actually understanding what sits on the other side. The devil is in the detail. The detail can be a lot worse than what we think. So that's why the People's Alliance currently will not touch the threshold. If anything, that will be looked at in terms of an overall package.
Mr. Narube.
Yeah, tax does a few things. One, of course, it funds government expenses, but the second, it redistributes income. So we're taking the second one, to redistribute income. We've talked about the high level of poverty, the difficulty of facing this high cost of living. So we are using tax to redistribute income. We are moving the threshold from $30,000 to $40,000. So if your earning income is from $40,000 or below, you will not be paying any taxes. The second is that we will also reduce taxes for those earning $50,000 and below. Reduce tax. They will still pay taxes, but will reduce. We will rebalance the book by increasing taxes on the social responsibility taxes, which kicks in at $270,000. So I think that's, to me, it's a fair way of distributing income at these very, very difficult times. So that's our policy on taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Naidu.
So Vijay, I'm pleased to hear that our partners in People's Alliance are thinking the same way we are. The first point about the Economic Summit is just so important because we have to get everybody's ideas on the table. The last fiscal review committee we had, we used to have them every 10 years or so. I think the last one was 2004. I actually was a member of that committee. And what that committee does is it gathers in information from all the technocrats, the public, the business community, etc., and it looks at fiscal policy, how we tax and how we spend. And it's really important that we do that exercise again. So from NFP's viewpoint, certainly no change to the current tax regime until we have a good look at it. I think certainly, to Mr. Narube's point about redistribution, the wealthy, I think, are in a position to pay more. But we have to look at how we do that, because while it's very attractive to say, tax wealthy people, that doesn't necessarily raise a lot of revenue. And so sometimes it doesn't actually achieve the effect. But the redistribution aspect is important. I think it is important that we show that the government is committed to ensuring that we share. So at this point, though, in answer to your question, no change to tax policy until we have consulted and until we have looked at it, through a mechanism like the Fiscal Review Committee, because that's the way it's supposed to be properly done.
Mr. Chaudhry?
I think I said earlier that we'll maintain the 30,000 threshold, but we feel that tax reforms are necessary. Government needs the revenue to provide services, and it must extract this tax without hurting the people. Those who have the ability should be taxed, and those who do not have the ability should not be unfairly taxed.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. Now, this is an important issue. A lot of questions have come in relation to this, to deal with education. Can you give specific details on whether you will continue with fee-free education for primary and secondary schools, and your plan for TELS loans? It's more than $500 million now that students are owing, who have even, there's many who have finished the program, and they say they have loans amounting to about $30,000 and more, and they do not have a job to pay it back. There's a toppers program for about 600. I think the numbers are increased a little bit in the budget, and the TELS program under the current government, which they say that it will continue. Some of the parties have said the system will be changed. The students coming out of secondary school, those who are in the programs, they would like to know from you, what does your party have to offer, or what decision you have made regarding this? I'll start off with Unity Fiji.
Yeah, education to us is the key out of our structural poverty. Intergenerational poverty is education. That's the key. So apart from free education, there are very other aspects that we would put in place to improve the quality of education. But let me first talk on the financial assistance to primary education up to high school. We'll continue to do that. Free bus fares and other things that this government has introduced. I think that's a good benefits for our students, and we'll continue to do that. We'll change the tertiary scholarship that you mentioned, Vijay. We'll abolish TELS, we'll abolish toppers, because we believe that education is a right, it's not a privilege. So education, our children should be allowed to achieve the highest education level, irrespective of their incomes, of their parents. So we will abolish those two. Any child, any student that has been offered a place at a university in Fiji or a higher education institution will be offered a scholarship. There will be no conditions on marks. We will remove and forgive all TELS loans.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. Mr. Kamikamica.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. Like in terms of the social safety net, free bus fares and the like, that is obviously going to be maintained and preserved. That is a right that is in existence, and we don't intend to do anything with that. In terms of TELS and toppers, the government in its actions itself is admitting that it's not working. They're now saying if you can organize repayment through a bank, you get a 50% discount straight away. The idea of a young unemployed person going to get debt funding from a bank and possibly defaulting on that debt is daunting in itself. So we are changing the scheme. Removing TELS and toppers. I was a beneficiary of scholarships. And with scholarships, you are provided an opportunity to study And as long as you work your way back in your home country for a couple of years, in my case I think it was 3 or 4 years, the investment that the country has placed in you effectively is acquitted. So that's the way we're looking at it. The debt will be forgiven as well. In fact, the funny thing on that is if you look at the budget itself, government only estimates about, out of that 500 million, a repayment of 6 million every year. So if we theorize on it, it's 100 years before that debt will be extinguished. So there is a whole, the system's not working. On my trip to Australia in August, I met with young men and women who were in Australia on the seasonal workers scheme and NEC to repay their debt in Fiji. What an absolute nonsense. That's why we're looking at it the way we're looking at it. No debt for all our students. They start their future without any encumbrances over them, and they are able to start their lives meaningfully rather than have this challenge of sort of 30,000, 40,000 or whatever the number is, sitting on their heads when they leave school.
Mr. Chaudhry.
Yes, we intend to reinstate the scholarship scheme, which was there in place before the toppers came in. So under that scheme, there were 3 or 4 different types of scholarships, and some 4,000 to 5,000 students were either able to get full scholarship or partial scholarship. Now, with regard to TELS, I think there is an obligation to pay. We've signed a contract, but at the same time, it's an enormous problem because if we can't create jobs for the students who come out, we must look at it from their point of view as well, that we must give them the opportunity to obtain jobs overseas if they can, and repay if the amount that they've borrowed. But I think it's a huge problem now, and we've got to take a fresh look at it. There's debt forgiveness promised by some parties. We've also got to look at it in relation to other people who have borrowed money from the government and are making repayments from that point of view. So we will review this when we are in office to see what is the best solution in terms of relieving the
TELS, what we will do with the TELS who have people
who are owing the
and
fine.
the scholarships, is it scholarships for a selected number of people? You're saying 4,000 to 5,000, or you will give scholarships to everyone?
Well, we'll give scholarships to people who are taking courses which are in the national interest, and courses and also assistance to disadvantaged students from poor families, which were covered previously under the affirmative action programs, and so we feel that in this manner we'll be able to assist at least 4,000 to 5,000 students to obtain
if people
tertiary
meet the requirements, then they'll get the scholarships.
That's right, yes.
Mr. Naidu.
So Vijay, I think the first thing we have to address is this myth that the Fiji First government is responsible for fee-free education. That has been embedded for 20, 30 years. It's simply that it's been progressed upwards. So this idea that it's only Fiji First that ever guaranteed or brought in free education is just false. This is now part of national policy. There is no political party that would try to impose fees on primary and secondary schools. I think like Mr. Narube and Mr. Kamikamica, the bus fares, all of that assistance that's been provided, that has now become embedded. It's part of national policy. Nobody is going to change that. But it's really important that we all understand that these policies have been around long before Fiji first came along. So now let's get to tertiary. Let's be honest. We've talked about the national debt. We've talked about the constrained government finances. Can we promise everybody that their debt will be wiped out? No. Can we promise everybody that they'll all get scholarships? No. What we've got to do again is sit down and look at the problem. So there are a lot of ways that we can deal with this. One is obviously, and again, we're not committed to anything, but these are the ideas we want to explore. Means testing, because there are a whole lot of people, particularly I think in the topless area, as I understand, who have received scholarships when really they had, or their families had, the financial ability to support them. So then you're really taking those resources away from people who do not have the money to study. I think the other challenge that we've had in the past, and it's important that we understand what's gone wrong in the past so we understand what to do in the future, is that we've been giving out scholarships willy-nilly to people to study in disciplines. I mean, I know in law, for example, we have a whole lot of people who have graduated. We have 3 law schools in Fiji now, producing law graduates who can't find jobs. Why did we get ourselves into that position where we were spending government resources and leaving people in debt, raising their expectations, and being unable to actually produce jobs for them? If you look in the US, for example, what's happening now is that the government is progressively reducing debt, small amounts at a time. That is also a possibility. And it's possible perhaps that you might say, well, we've got a different way of working off your debt if, say, you stay in the country and you find a job in the private sector. There are lots of ways in which we can look at this in the interests of people who have not been well treated by, the TEL system and the scholarship system. So this has got to be really completely re-looked at. We've got to go back to ensuring that education is available to everybody within their means. If there are people who cannot afford it, they're the ones who should have the priority. For those whose families can contribute to the cost of education, then there should be a contribution. Because if we don't do it that way, it's the most disadvantaged people who miss out. So the resources have got to, the government resources, the public resources have got to go to the people who have the least ability to pay. Because as we all agree around this table, it's education that's going to lift us up. It's providing the opportunities to those people who do not have the resources, the family resources. That's what lifts them quickly to a different standard of living.
The next question is an important one. How will you deal with civil service appointments and contracts? Because at the end of the day, it's the civil servants who execute plans that you set out. There's a lot of questions that have come in from civil servants in relation to this area about their salaries, their contracts, security of their jobs. We'll start off with Mr. Chaudhry.
Yes, indeed. First of all, we'll reinstate permanent appointments. As you know, now we have individual contracts of employment, some for as short as 6 months to 3 years. So on all permanent establishment positions, security of employment will be restored. The retirement age will be moved back to 60, and The Public Service Commission will be made responsible for determining the terms and conditions of employment, the rights of civil servants to collective bargaining and freedom of association will be restored, the rights of the unions to negotiate salary increases and terms and conditions of employment will be restored. These rights have been taken away. Virtually, there is no collective bargaining anymore in the public service. So all these rights will be restored because these were rights which were obtained by the unions and by the workers over a period of years. And they must be restored. And we are a member state of the International Labour Organization. And therefore, it is only fair, it is only proper that our labour relations laws and practices should align with the instruments and conventions, core instruments and conventions of the International Labour Organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. Mr. Naidu.
So, Vijay, you raise a good point, that it is the public service that executes what the politicians want. But the public service is more important than that, because the public service is the permanent government. And what we say must happen in the public service is not just about the public servants themselves. It's about good governance. It's about how the country is run. You start with the proposition that the public service must be independent. You must have civil servants who are able to say to a politician, "Minister, you are wrong," or "Minister, that is not the best way forward." What has happened is that in the last 15 years, the public service has become completely politicized by arbitrary sackings and essentially a climate of fear right across the public service. Why are public service servants put on 3-year contracts now? Because that's a way of bending them to your will. That is why they don't want permanent civil servants who have tenure, who can stay in position. It's about saying to somebody, you have only a 3-year contract, and if you don't do what I say, and if you don't execute and support everything I say, you will lose your job at the end of 3 years. So this is not just about protecting the rights of public servants. It's about protecting good governance and making sure that the public service stays independent and strong. So definitely we go back to permanent employment, because that's what a good public service requires. And certainly no pay cuts. What we've actually got to do is, and I talked about this a little bit better, ways of ensuring that that people in the public service are able to work more efficiently, the way we've learned, how to do it in the public sector. So no changes to civil servants' terms and conditions. We've got to relook at this. I think the Public Service Commission has got to come back enhanced. Look at the situation with teachers. Teachers haven't had even their pay reviews, most of them, for even the 17 and 18 years. For the 2017-2018 years. What's happening? How is it that public servants' jobs and their careers have been managed so badly? So, Vijay, this, as I say, the NFP's position on the public service is to protect its independence. And that means that they must be permanent, they must be well paid and well rewarded. Because this is not just about them, it's actually about good governance in the country.
Mr. Kamikamica.
Throughout the contracts, bring back the retirement age to 60. There is definitely a need for a total review of the civil service. That's in the manifesto. And to what Richard's saying, the civil servants have lost the independence, which protects good governance in terms of the running of government.
So you take away the term contracts and bring back the permanent contracts.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we'll do most of the things that have been mentioned around the table on civil servants. There is a hard element of control by this government on civil servants. their morale, I think, is one of the lowest in our history. The ministers should only concentrate on policies and strategies. They are going right down to operational matters. That frustrates a lot of civil servants. So the contract, yes, we'll remove all the contracts, but we would like to retain contracts on 3 top positions in the civil service, which are the permanent secretary, the deputy secretary, and the directors, for more accountability and performance. So we're going to look at expatriate engagement of expatriates in the civil service, whether we really need expatriates with very high salary and additional costs of repatriation. So we are going to also look at the equity aspect of civil servants, the equity amongst all the ethnic groups here in Fiji. I think there has been a skewed distribution of civil servants along those lines. I think for greater transparency on the merit of each of those appointments will need to be examined. So we need to bring back and restore some equity in those the top positions of civil service.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. My final question, of course, a lot has to be done according to everyone in this room. What is your message to the people watching? Do you have the proven people in your team with sound economic policies and knowledge? And do you have a strategic plan that runs over the next 4 years? And I'll give you, as your closing message to the people, to tell the people, what do you have? Mr. Kamikamica.
Thank you, Vijay. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to come and share some of our ideas. I think to the people of Fiji, I think this government has been around for too long. And they have absolutely failed the country from an economic perspective. Why do I say that? Apart from the discussions we've had around wastage, corruption is alluded to by Mr. Chaudhry, the failure to diversify the economy. Had they started, for example, let's just take the BPO industry. Mr. Atma Maharaj in 2009 had said, if we develop the industry by around about now, there'd be about $2 or $3 billion circulating in the economy. That was a paper he presented in 2009 based on certain scenarios. What did this government do? Totally did not diversify the economy. Focused on tourism, one-trick pony, and left the other existing industries that had been developed by Ratumara and subsequent governments to just deteriorate. A classic example is dairy. When I was a board member in dairy, that was around early 2000s, they were producing 10 to 12 million liters of milk. Right now, they are producing 4 to 5 million liters of milk. And they totally restructured that industry, allowing a private company to run the manufacturing plant with duty concessions for, I think, 10 years, if I'm not wrong. So from that perspective, they have let this country down. Had they diversified from earlier on, when COVID hit, we would have buffers in the economy. I know for a fact the BPO industry during COVID was thriving. It was on full go. There were people being employed, and the government only started looking at the BPO sector because of COVID. The governor had, sort of explains it well when he says, there's no other industries other than tourism. Which proves the point around the concerns about diversification. I wanted to touch too on a point that Mr. Chaudhry brought up about corruption, because it's very important for the people of Fiji to understand. I have here Act 35 of 2021. I urge all of you to read it. because what it states is very interesting. What it says is people that had disposed of shares before 2020, before 1st of May 2011, and had not paid the tax, were no longer required to pay the tax. And then it says further, for the avoidance of doubt, the disposal of shares held by the person on or before May 2011 for the payment of tax is not refundable. I bring this up because this is one of the strangest acts enacted in our country, and this government has allowed it to happen. The question, it's a pity that the Attorney General of the Minister of Economy is not here, because I would have asked him. This change in law, who did it benefit? And that's something that I hope he can answer, because the people of Fiji need to know whether a law was changed to benefit someone. So that's I'm not making any specific, pointing out any specific names, but that's a very serious issue that needs to be brought to light. I think overall, from the People's Alliance perspective, a lot of our policies will hinge finally around the need to have a national economic summit, which is important, Vijay. We are intending to reintroduce the tripartite forum. Mr. Chaudhry has articulately mentioned the loss of workers' rights in this country. It's an embarrassment. You got ATS, for example. Up till lately, they were on daily contracts. They've been locked out. Their trust, which owns shares in ATS, have been locked out from participating on the board of ATS for so many years. Just in totality, this government, through poor governance, through financial mismanagement, has let this whole country down. And from where I sit, we need to make some serious changes in this country, bring in a new type of leadership for this country, leadership that has vision, that respects good governance, the rule of law, and here is a classic example of where things get out of hand.
Mr. Chaudhry, what is your message to the people? Do you have proven people in your team with sound economic policies and knowledge? Do you have a strategic plan over the next 4 years?
Well, I think we've actually covered that in the last hour or so in different sectors of the economy. But one thing I must say, and this is a message to the people of Fiji, that we must return to democratic governance. We must reclaim our rights and freedoms that we have lost under this government. We must regain our self-respect and be a free people. We must reclaim those rights, and we will. And our self-respect, I see an element of fear. I do not know why. People are afraid to criticize the government or to speak freely. Of course, we know what the kind of environment that they have created, but we must fight back. We must fight back. And this is the opportunity, this election, because you've got to remove the root cause of the problems that this nation is facing, and that is the Fiji First Party.
Mr. Naidu.
So I have not finished yet. So that's the message to the people of Fiji. But we must also learn from the lessons, from the failure of the economic policies of the Fiji First government, which is responsible for the kind of poverty, deprivation, and joblessness, homelessness that we see in this country. So we must first of all learn to live within our means. As a nation, we must invest more in the productive sectors of the economy, agriculture, forestry and fisheries. That's where the wealth lies. These are resources owned by the people of Fiji, and we must invest in these resources so that the money stays here and the wealth that is created for our people and not taken outside of the country. That we must produce more than what we consume. We must discourage non-essential imports, that we must increase our self-reliance as a nation by manufacturing and processing locally as much as we can, that we must curtail unnecessary expenditure and wastage, that we must eradicate corrupt practices and enhance accountability and transparency in governance. So this is my message to the people, and we have a team.
I was just saying, you missing out on that your team one. People would want to know, do you have proven people in your team with sound economic policies and knowledge?
The policies of the party apply to the team. So if you are in government, certainly.
You have proven people.
Yes.
You
You
missed out on that.
Yeah, apologies, I missed out on that. From outside, apart from myself in the economic team, we've got 7 others that have capabilities in the economic area. Some names are familiar to some people. Cecil Brown is a well-experienced banker who has been around for some time and understands economics and finance. We've got Samuel Were, who was a former, he worked in investment, worked in FNPF, and as well as the Reserve Bank, I believe. We've got people like Esiromi Bayameame. He was the CEO of Yasana Holdings, a well-experienced finance person. There's others. There's Rajesh Prasad, who's a businessman. There's actually 2 businessmen. There's Daniel Lobandan, has built a successful business. Rajesh Prasad, who's built a successful business. And there's a young man called Pritam Shokar, who's also a businessman and actually works in accounting services. So the People's Alliance team is quite broad, and we have a myriad or a combination of disciplines that, if brought to bear, will provide good solutions for our country. Thank you.
Mr. Naidu.
So Vijay, your question was about strategy and people. The first point, which is an important point to make to all of the people of Fiji. If you look around this table, if you vote People's Alliance or if you vote NFP, you get 2 for the price of 1, because the 2 parties are committed to going into government together. So you get the synergies and you get the benefits of the whole team. Obviously, the leading economic light in the NFP is Professor Prasad, Professor of Economics. He's a distinguished economist, and he has been ringing the warning bells of our economic situation in Parliament for the last 8 years. He knows what he's talking about. There are a number of business people in the NFP team, and the reality, I think, is that there are too many people in the PA-NFP combined team to fill all the portfolios. So it's not going to be a problem filling those portfolios. But I want to come back. I want to come now to the second piece of what I want to say. And this is something that you'll hear Professor Prasad say often. It's an old economic axiom. Everything is connected to everything else. It sounds a bit obvious, but it's deeper than it sounds. Some people have asked the question, what is a lawyer doing here talking about economics, and haven't we had enough lawyers running economies for long enough? And the answer is, in my defense, well, I actually also have an accounting degree. I'm not quite as eminently qualified as Mr. Kamikamica, but more importantly, and most importantly, I am in business. I own a business, and I have a business with my 4 partners. It is a large law firm. It is a medium-sized business. So I live business and commerce every day. That's what I do. Now, in the course of that, and I want to talk about strategy. I have to work with my partners because they are the stakeholders in the business of which we are all part. We have to come to agreement through dialogue and consultation on what our strategy is going to be. And once we have agreed on that, we have to go to our employees and we have to persuade them of the direction in which we are moving. Those are the necessary elements of an essential business. Consultation, dialogue, sharing. They cost nothing, but they are essential in ensuring that a business is successful. And as it is with a business, so it is with the economy. That is the only way for us to be successful. We've all got to be traveling in the same direction. That doesn't mean we'll agree on everything, but it means that we understand the direction in which we are moving. And so when you talk about economic management, you've also got to talk about everything else, because everything else is connected. You've got to talk about education. You've got to talk about poverty. You've got to talk about housing. You've got to talk about, all of these elements that go into an economy. So the last point, and this is really the last point that I want to make, and Mr. Chaudhry touched on it. This is not a choice, this election, about which party is going to govern. This is a much more stark choice. It's democracy against dictatorship. I don't know how many young people have said to me, if this government comes back, we are leaving. And that's a really serious threat to our country. If we cannot keep our young people, if we cannot keep our young, skilled, entrepreneurial people, then we have both an economy and a country that will be in serious trouble for a generation. So my point, I think, Vijay, is that the strategy must come from us all coming together, consulting. Manoa's talked about a National Economic Summit. It's actually got to be a broader set of consultation than that, because we have not had that for more than 10 years. We've missed out on all of these opportunities. We've missed out on ideas and contributions from people who should be contributing. It's about getting everybody's ideas together, about everybody believing that they are part of the solution and that we are all traveling together. And that only happens if you are running your country democratically. People are not in fear. We don't have a country that is divided. It's got to be a country where we are all working in the same direction. And believe it or not, that is going to be a country that is completely different from the one that we are in right now. It's that stark. And so if you want to talk about strategy, it's about ensuring that everybody is together, that we have consulted, that we are all understanding of the direction in which we are traveling. And that is, people ask, what is going to be different about the next government? And the answer is everything, because that is everything. We cannot change our economic direction until we are all traveling in the same direction.
Thank you, Mr. Naidu. Mr. Narube.
There are two components that you ask. Of course, is the long-term, medium-term plan and the capacity to deliver on those plans. Our long-term, medium-term plan is what we're calling our 4 R's. The first R is rebase. We rebase the economy. And the second is we reduce poverty. The third, we redistribute income from the poor, from the rich to the poor, And the last one, we reprioritize our expenses. That is, in a nutshell, is our 4-year plan for the country. And many times, in our discussions, the ordinary people are not represented. And this is where we're going to come in from the ordinary people, the poor people's focus. And we would like to to focus our policies a lot on that redistribution of income and wealth. This government has favored the rich more than the poor. That has to be reversed. And we talk here, and of course I agree with the economic summit, but I've been in many summits before. It's dominated by capitalists. They are not representative of poor people in that. So for us, we will need to reinvent that kind of consultation. We need to get the poor represented in the discussion, in the dialogue on the economy. The disparity is widening, and that disparity will lead to other political issues. So we need to tackle that first and foremost on reducing the disparity of income between the rich and the poor. We are starting already in some of those things. But our flagship there will be the Economic Transformation Program. We believe that will revolutionize our economy. It will change things around, particularly for the poor people, the tenants as well as the owners of land and resources. So we'll start there. And I think the rural people will benefit from that. And that is where we are going to focus a lot. The other things that I've mentioned, the tax package, is important. But I think the major issue for us, for jobs, for incomes, for redistribution of wealth, is that economic transformation program.
Thank you very much.
We have the team. Sorry, the second part, if I may. We have the team. I have my track record there for everybody. And we have good people there. But I always emphasize that it doesn't matter a good team. If the leader is wrong, that is a problem. And I emphasize it again today. We must choose the right leader. And the right leader supported by the right team is the best combination ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. Of course, we've covered a lot tonight. These are important issues that people have been sending us questions in relation to economic policies, and they wanted simplification of information. Thank you to those parties who came to the table today. The Fiji Labour Party, Mr. Chaudhry, National Federation Party, Mr. Richard Naidu, Mr. Manoa Kamikamica from the People's Alliance, and Mr. Narube from Unity Fiji. Unfortunately, Fiji First Party did not respond, did not confirm, and did not attend. And we had sent out invites from early November. SODELPA, as we've said earlier, if you missed it, they had confirmed, then they changed their nominee, and then they withdrew their nominee last night. But the show must go on, because the people need to know what is going on. And the people need to know what the parties have to offer. Coming up tomorrow, we've got a request that's pending, the Supervisor of Elections for tomorrow night, and we are awaiting his confirmation. So stay on our platforms and listen to our radio stations. We'll give you an update on that. But next week, we have on Tuesday, 6th December, we have a debate with all the youth candidates, and on the 8th of December, debate with the women candidates. And we have invited the different parties, the Fiji First Party, the National Federation Party, the People's Alliance, Fiji Labour Party, Unity Fiji, and SODELPA, and we are awaiting confirmations. So far, NFP has come back and confirmed that for the women's debate, it will be Lenora Ngere Tambua, and for the youth candidates, Apanisa Vatunive Vuke, and we are awaiting confirmation. The other parties have confirmed. They are just giving the names which will be coming through, except for Fiji First. We are awaiting their confirmation. And on Sunday, 11 December at 7 p.m., the leaders debate, the confirmed leaders, Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka, People's Alliance, Professor Biman Prasad, NFP, Mr. Savenaca Narube, Unity Fiji, SODELPA leader William Ngavoka, and Fiji Labour Party leader Mahendra Chaudhry already confirmed. 5, 1 yet to confirm, the Fiji First Leader Vorenge Bainimarama. We will give you the confirmations as they come. Stay with us. Have a great evening.